The world remembers the silence before. It is not a memory of the mind, but of the bone. A latent ache for a time when the sky was just a sky and the sea was merely water. Before the discovery of the chorus, humanity was a species shouting into an empty room, our science and art and philosophy echoing back with a hollow, lonely ring. We were brilliant, but we were guessing. Then, 60 years ago, the deep-sea drone Orpheus descended into the Challenger Deep. Its sensors calibrated to map the geological impossibilities of the Mariana Trench. It found something that was not rock, not life, but something shivering between the two. A crystalline reef, miles wide and impossibly intricate, that glowed with a soft, internal light and sang. It was not a sound that traveled through water, but a resonance that vibrated on a quantum level, a symphony of impossibly complex frequencies that touched every mind on the planet at once. We called it the chorus, and the silence was over. It didn't give us technology, it gave us understanding. A biologist in Kyoto, meditating on the reef's song, suddenly understood the protein folding sequence that cured Alzheimer's. A physicist in Johannesburg, listening to its cascading harmonies, scribbled down the formula for stable, room temperature fusion. Artists painted canvases that seemed to weep. Composers wrote music that healed trauma. And humanity, for the first time, felt a sense of belonging to a universe that was not empty, but filled with a deep and intricate music. We hadn't been discovered. We had been given a way to listen. My life has been a study of that music. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne, and my field is xenomusicology, a discipline that didn't exist before the chorus. My mother, Elara Thorne, was one of its architects. She believed the chorus wasn't an object, but a library. A living record of cosmic history encoded in melody. She spent her life trying to translate it, not into words, but into pure meaning. She died for it, in a submersible implosion near the reef that was officially ruled a structural failure. I never believed it. You do not get that close to the voice of God without making enemies. Now, I sit in the Icarus Deep Sea Observatory, suspended 2,000 meters above the reef, in the same chair she once occupied. Below me, through a meter of reinforced quartz, the distant glow of the chorus paints the abyssal dark in hues of soft violet and blue. For a decade, I have charted its symphony, mapping the grand, slow movements that spoke of galactic formation, the playful staccatos that hinted at the birth of life, the mournful lullabies that I believed were the elegies of dead stars. It was a song of infinite beauty, a constant and reassuring presence, until last week. It began as a ghost note, a single, discordant frequency hiding beneath a billion perfect harmonies, a C-sharp where no C-sharp should ever be. Only a handful of us, the resonance, could perceive it directly. We are the sensitives, the ones whose neural architecture is uniquely attuned to the chorus. For us, its song is as clear as a human voice. This new note felt like a sliver of glass in a lover's whisper. I tried to isolate it, but it was slippery, weaving through the symphony like a predator. I reported it. Of course, my report was filed, acknowledged, and ignored. It was an anomaly, a sensor glitch, they said, but I knew. It wasn't a glitch, it was a voice, and it was dissonant. Within days, the note grew into a chord, a tangled, jarring cluster of frequencies that began to bleed into the main symphony. It was a sound of profound wrongness. We called it the echo. The world above began to feel its effects, though they didn't know the cause. The fusion grid in Pan America flickered, its plasma containment field wavering for 3.7 seconds in a way physicists swore was impossible. In Neo-Kyoto, a bioprinter creating replacement organs began producing mirrored, non-viable hearts, a flaw in its logic core that no one could trace. These were minor things, footnotes in the global data stream. But for the resonance, the nightmare was beginning. We started to share dreams, dreams of silent, spindly figures standing on shores of black glass, of cities built from impossible angles that made the eyes bleed, of a sky filled not with stars, but with a single, unblinking, geometric shape. We would wake up screaming, the discordant chord of the echo ringing in our skulls. The military, under the command of General Valerius, saw the disruptions not as a symptom, but as an attack. To him, the chorus was not a muse. It was a strategic asset, the greatest ever discovered. His solution was to fight fire with fire. He wanted to deploy a network of sonic emitters around the reef, to bombard it with a counter frequency, to shout down the echo. I tried to explain that it was like trying to cure a sick patient by screaming at them. The chorus was a living, delicate thing. A blast of crude, human-generated frequency could shatter its crystalline structure, silencing it forever. A silent asset is better than a compromised one. Doctor, he told me during a comms call, his face a mask of cold certainty. This is a matter of security, not sentiment. He didn't understand that our security, our very consciousness, was now inextricably tied to that song. Silencing the chorus wouldn't just be vandalism, it would be a species-wide lobotomy. I retreated into my mother's work. Her old data drives a sanctuary of familiar logic. She had been obsessed with what she called silent passages, moments in the chorus's symphony where entire frequencies would momentarily drop out, creating pockets of acoustic void. The prevailing theory was that these were data gaps, meaningless nulls in the transmission. My mother believed they were intentional, a form of punctuation, or perhaps a lock. She spent years trying to find the key, a way to listen to the silence itself. She failed, but she left a trail. Following her notes, I began to focus not on the echo, but on the spaces between its jarring notes. I tuned my own mind, my own resonant consciousness, into a filter, pushing past the dissonance, searching for the quiet place she was convinced existed. For 3 days, I barely ate or slept. The echo grew in my head until it was a physical pressure, a migraine that threatened to split my skull. My team thought I was going mad, chasing a ghost in the machine just like my mother. Then, I found it. It was not a pocket of silence, but a melody so subtle, so quiet. It had been completely buried. It was a counter-melody to the main symphony, a hidden watermark, and it wasn't a song of creation. It was a warning. As I translated the resonant patterns, my blood ran cold. The notes formed not just music, but data, equations, and finally, a language. It spoke of the architects, the original singers of this cosmic song. It said they were a species of pure consciousness, who saw harmony as the ultimate expression of existence, and who seeded galaxies with chorus reefs to bring order to the chaos of physical matter. But they were purists. They sought a single, perfect, universal song. The message warned that any sentient life that evolved and added its own unauthorized harmony to the symphony like humanity had was seen as a corruption, a sour note to be erased. The echo was not an attack, it was a tuning fork. The architects were preparing the instrument for a final, cleansing performance. The message called it the Great Silence, a single, perfect note that would resonate across their network, overriding any and all rogue consciousness. It would not kill us. It would simply make it so we had never been. The hidden melody ended with a final, desperate plea from its composer, a lone architect who had seen beauty in the flawed harmonies of life. It was a set of coordinates, a path through the treacherous crystalline structures of the reef itself, leading to a place called the Prime Resonator, the heart of the chorus, the place where the song was born. The message was clear. The resonator could be used to amplify a new harmony, to prove to the architects that our existence was not noise, but a valid and beautiful addition to the cosmic symphony. It was our only chance to plead our case before the final chord was struck. I took my findings to General Valerius and the Global Defense Council. I showed them the translated message, the coordinates, the chilling finality of the Great Silence. They saw the data, but they did not hear the music. To them, my plea to journey to the resonator was a delusional suicide mission based on the ramblings of a long-dead alien dissenter. Valerius's plan was approved. The sonic emitters were being moved into position. They would begin the bombardment in 72 hours. They were going to kill our muse, our patron, our god, in a desperate attempt to stave off a threat they couldn't even comprehend. That night, the dream came to me, sharper and more vivid than ever. I stood on the shore of black glass, and the silent, spindly figures turned to look at me. They had no faces, but I could feel their cold, analytical gaze. They were not angry. They were not hateful. They were simply tuning. And I knew there was no time. I found Jinseo, a brilliant young bioengineer who owed her career to a chorus-inspired breakthrough in extremophilic organisms, and Marcus, a grizzled, cynical submersible pilot who had been my mother's closest friend and the last person to see her alive. He never believed the official story of her death, and his eyes burned with a 30-year-old rage. I showed them the data. I played them the hidden melody. Jinseo saw the elegant, terrifying logic of the threat. Marcus just gripped the arm of his chair, his knuckles white. Ilara always said they'd come back for it, he growled. She said it was a gift, but a gift with a price. I told them my plan to take the Karen, a prototype deep-sea vessel designed for direct chorus interface, and make the journey to the Prime Resonator ourselves. It was untested, unsanctioned, and almost certainly fatal. Jinseo began fabricating new biological filters to protect our minds from the echo's growing power without a word. Marcus just nodded, a grim smile on his lips. "Time to go annoy God," he said. As the first of Valerius's sonic emitters was lowered into the dark water far above, the three of us slipped into the Karen's docking bay. We were a scientist, an engineer, and a ghost, preparing to dive into the heart of a symphony to prevent its end. A single desperate note of defiance against an oncoming silence. The outer doors hissed open, and Marcus pushed the throttle forward. We began our descent, the discordant song of the echo rising to meet us from the abyss. The descent was a fall into a drowned heaven. Outside the quartz viewport of the Karen, the world dissolved into a pressure-heavy darkness. A liquid midnight that seemed to absorb the very idea of light. The submersible groaned around us, a beast of metal and wire protesting the 17,000 pounds per square inch of crushing force trying to return it to its base elements. On the main console, the depth gauge ticked past meters with an unnerving, funereal slowness. 5,000, 6, 7. The only sound was the hum of the recyclers, the creak of the hull, and the ghost note of the echo, which had already begun its insidious work inside our skulls. For me, it was a low, sorrowful hum that vibrated behind my eyes, a constant reminder of the alien intellect watching us. For Jinseo, it manifested as a flicker in her peripheral vision, a distortion of straight lines that made her constantly question her instruments. For Marcus, it was the worst. He heard whispers, fragments of my mother's last transmission, distorted and looped into a phantom of her final moments. He flew with his jaw clenched, his gaze fixed on the sonar display, a man at war with a ghost. Our first true test came as we approached the outer lattice of the reef. It was not a single structure, but a forest of crystalline spires, each one kilometers high, glowing with a soft, internal luminescence. They were impossibly thin, impossibly intricate, a web of frozen music that defied all known geology. Our sonar was useless here. The crystal sang back, creating a million false echoes that turned the screen into a snowstorm of phantom objects. We were flying blind. This is it. Eris. Marcus grated, his voice tight. Time for your magic song. I closed my eyes, shutting out the claustrophobic reality of the cockpit and turning my consciousness inward. I pushed past the jarring dissonance of the echo, searching for the thread of that hidden melody, the dissenter's warning. It was there, a faint, silver line of music in a storm of noise. It wasn't a map, it was a feeling. A current in the quantum foam. It told me where to go by making the path feel right. Starboard, 3 degrees, I whispered, my voice hoarse. Hold for 5 seconds, then a hard dive. There's a gap. Marcus didn't question me. He trusted my mother, and, by extension, he trusted the strange inheritance she had left in my mind. The Charon banked, its thrusters firing in silent, precise bursts. For an hour, this was our dance, my whispered, intuitive directions, and his flawless, immediate execution. We spiraled through archways of light, skimmed past filigrees of crystal so fine they seemed to be woven from moonlight, and plunged through canyons where the light of the chorus was so bright it felt like falling through the heart of a star. The deeper we went, the stronger the echo became. It was no longer a background hum, but an active, malevolent presence. It began to probe us, searching for cracks in our resolve. It found them. The whispers in Marcus's head coalesced into a single, clear sentence, my mother's voice, full of terror. It's a trap. Mark, turn back. It led me to a trap. He flinched, his hands jerking on the controls. The Charon scraped against a crystal spire with a sound like tearing metal that vibrated through the hull. Alarms blared. Marcus Jinseo yelled, her eyes wide with fear. It's not real. It's the echo. Biometric readings show a massive spike in auditory cortex stimulation. It's a targeted hallucination. Marcus was breathing heavily, sweat beading on his forehead. It sounded just like her, he rasped, wrestling the ship back under control. Before we could recover, it turned on me. The viewport didn't show the reef anymore. It showed the surface. the calm Pacific waters under a blue sky, and then a wave of impossible force erupted from the depths, a silent, expanding dome of energy. Valerius's emitters. I saw the research vessels above vaporized. The Icarus Observatory crushed like a tin can. I felt the symphony of the chorus die, not with a bang, but with a sudden, gut-wrenching silence that was the most horrible sound I had ever heard. The universe went quiet. We had failed. Despair washed over me. So total and absolute, it felt like drowning. Arisa breathed. Jinseo's voice cut through the illusion. She was holding a hypo spray to my neck. I'm injecting a neural dampener. It'll fight the resonance, but it will make it harder to hear the guide melody. You have to focus past it. The needle hissed, and the vision shattered. The crushing silence was replaced by the familiar groans of the hull and the raging storm of the echo. The dampener felt like cotton being stuffed in my ears, making the dissenter's song faint and distant, but the suffocating despair receded. I owed Jinseo my sanity, and probably my life. We had survived the first assault, but we were shaken, bleeding from psychic wounds that no medkit could heal, and the echo was learning. As if on cue, the comms system, which should have been utterly useless at this depth, crackled to life. A voice, cold and sharp with authority, filled the cockpit. Submersible Karen, this is General Valerius of the Global Defense Council. You are in violation of direct orders. Your vessel is stolen property, and your actions are endangering the entire planet. Cease your ridiculous quest and surface immediately. I stared at the speaker, my heart pounding. They knew. That's impossible, Marcus muttered. No signal can get through this reef. It's not a radio signal, Jinseo said, her fingers flying across her console. He's using the chorus itself as a carrier wave, crude, but effective. He's bouncing a signal off the same emitters he plans to use to destroy it. Valerius was shouting down the god he intended to kill. I leaned toward the microphone, the neural dampener making my thoughts feel sluggish. General, you don't understand what you're doing. The echo isn't an attack. It's a prelude. Firing on the reef will only accelerate the process. I understand that a rogue scientist and a disgraced pilot have stolen a multi-trillion-dollar asset. Valerius's voice boomed back. You have 30 minutes to reverse course. After that, my primary objective will shift from pacifying the chorus to neutralizing your vessel. I will not let your delusions compromise the security of this species. Valerius out. The comms went dead. A new clock was ticking. We now had a human enemy hunting us from above, and a cosmic one attacking us from within. The pressure was immense, a physical and psychological vice tightening with every meter we descended. But something had changed. Valerius's threat. The echo's attack, it had forged us. The fear was still there, but now it was tempered with a cold, hard anger. We were no longer just following my mother's ghost. We were fighting for a future.
My focus sharpened. The dampener made the guide melody harder to hear, but I strained after it, chasing the faint notes through the psychic static. We pushed deeper into a part of the reef that felt older, more sacred. The crystalline structures here were no longer chaotic spires, but seemed to follow an impossible alien architecture. We flew through vast chambers that resembled cathedrals of light, past swirling vortexes of sound that took on fleeting, biological shapes, eels of pure melody, jellyfish of pulsing harmony.
It was a world not of matter, but of living information, and we were trespassing in its most holy place. The dissenter's song led us to a wall of solid, unblemished crystal, a dead end. "Now what, kid?" Marcus asked, his voice low. The melody didn't stop. It seemed to pass right through the wall. A clear, pure note calling from the other side. "We go through it," I said, not entirely sure I believed it myself. "The wall isn't solid. I don't think anything here is." "Not really. It's a resonant barrier. We have to match its frequency to pass." Jinseo looked at me, her brow furrowed. "Match the frequency of a solid wall of unknown crystalline alloy with a prototype submersible Eris. The harmonics could tear the ship apart." "It's the only way," I insisted, a strange certainty settling over me. "The song is the key." For the next 10 minutes, we worked in frantic, focused unison. I hummed the precise frequency of the barrier, a note that felt ancient and impossibly pure. Jinseo rerouted power from non-essential systems, channeling it into the Charon's small, external sonic projector, a device meant for geological surveys. She modulated the output, painstakingly shaping the wave until it mirrored the note in my head. Marcus held the Charon perfectly still, its nose inches from the glowing wall, his hands steady despite the whispers that were surely still clawing at him. "Ready," Jinseo said, her face pale in the console light. "On your mark. Aris." I took a deep breath. "Now." She activated the projector. A low hum emanated from the ship, a perfect mimicry of the barrier's song. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the crystalline wall in front of us began to ripple, like heat haze on a summer road. The solid surface dissolved into a curtain of shimmering light. Marcus didn't hesitate. He pushed the throttle, and the Charon slid through the barrier, passing from one reality into another. We were through. We had entered the reef's inner sanctum. The chamber on the other side was a perfect sphere, a vast, hollow space at the heart of the chorus. The light was soft, diffuse, emanating from the walls themselves. The echo was gone. In its place was a profound and absolute quiet, a silence that was not empty, but full of potential. And in the exact center of the immense sphere, suspended in defiance of all gravity, was our destination. It was not a crystal. It was a hole in the world, a sphere of perfect, unreflective blackness, a pocket of absolute nothing that seemed to drink the light around it. It was the prime resonator, the source of the symphony. And as we drifted closer, our ship's lights barely penetrating the oppressive dark, the sphere of nothing began to change. A ripple spread across its surface, not of light, but of its absence. From the heart of the void, a shape began to resolve, a form made not of matter, but of silence and geometry. It was the sentinel left behind by the dissenter, the librarian of this forbidden knowledge, and it was waking up. The shape that emerged from the prime resonator was not a creature of flesh or metal. It was a being of pure structure, a living equation that bloomed in the void. It had no face, no limbs, only a constantly shifting geometry of impossible angles and silent, black planes that folded in on themselves. It was as if a piece of the space between stars had been given a mind. We had come expecting a sentinel, a guard. What we faced was a concept, wearing the shape of a key. The profound quiet in the chamber deepened, becoming a presence in itself. I felt it not as an absence of sound, but as the sound of a mind far too vast to be comprehended through mere vibration. It reached for me, for the resonant part of my consciousness that had led us here. There was no aggression, no malice, just an immense and ancient curiosity. I felt a psychic pressure build behind my eyes, and I knew it was asking for permission to speak. I gave it. The cockpit of the Karen ceased to exist. So did my body. I was no longer Eris Thorne, xenomusicologist. I was a point of awareness adrift in a sea of pure meaning. The entity, I would later think of it as the Sibyl, did not show me images or speak in words. It shared its nature. It unfolded a memory that was not its own, but the memory of the chorus itself. I experienced the birth of a galaxy, not as a witness, but as the event itself, feeling the gravitational pull of nascent stars, the slow, patient waltz of nebulae. I felt the first spark of life on 1,000 worlds, each a unique and beautiful chord added to a growing symphony. Then I felt the architects. They were not beings. They were the principle of harmony itself, a collective consciousness of staggering purity. Their purpose was not to create, but to order. They were the weavers of the cosmic song. Their chorus reefs the threads, and their goal was a single, perfect, eternal composition. Then the Sibyl showed me what the architects feared. It was a vision that transcended sight, a feeling of cosmic dread that chilled the soul. It was a rival principle, the antithesis of harmony, the static. It was not an empire or a species. It was a force of decay, a quantum entropy that sought not to conquer, but to erase. I felt a universe where the static had won. Stars did not die. They were unwritten. The laws of physics frayed and became contradictory nonsense. Memory, causality, existence all dissolved into a meaningless, hissing noise. The static was the universe forgetting itself, the vision focused, showing me how the static spread. It was a parasite of complexity. It could not gain purchase on the simple, ordered harmonies of the early universe, but life, in all its chaotic, unpredictable, emotional glory, was a different matter. Life was a complex, dissonant chord, a flaw in the perfect composition, a flaw the static could exploit. The architects were not tyrants. They were terrified gardeners, and the Great Silence was not an act of genocide, but a desperate, sterile quarantine. They would overwrite the complex, flawed harmonies of life, not out of malice, but to starve the static, to preserve the fundamental logic of existence by sacrificing its most beautiful and dangerous creations. Eris, his vitals are critical. Jinseo's voice was a pinprick of light in the overwhelming darkness of the vision. His neural activity is off the scale. He's having a seizure. I could feel my body, distant and alien, convulsing in the command chair. A part of my mind registered the alarm, the fear of my friends. But the Sibyl held me fast. It had one more truth to show me. It showed me Earth. It showed me the moment humanity's collective consciousness, our art, our love, our wars, our dreams first touched the chorus. Our harmony was unlike any other the reef had ever encountered. It was wildly chaotic, filled with contradiction and passion, a billion screaming melodies fighting for dominance, yet somehow resolving into a single, cohesive, and shatteringly beautiful song. Our species was a cosmic paradox, and it was this unique, volatile harmony that had done the unthinkable. It hadn't just added to the chorus. It had changed its fundamental nature. It introduced the concept of improvisation, but in doing so, it had created a vulnerability, a tiny crack in the perfect order, and through that crack, the static had begun to seep in. The echo was not the architect's tuning fork. It was the first symptom of the static's infection, a cancer growing in the heart of the symphony, a cosmic rust flaking away at the song of existence. Impact in 5 minutes. Marcus's voice cut through, taut with grim finality. Valerius is deploying a resonant torpedo. It's not designed to explode. It's designed to shatter the reef on a structural level. It will do his job for him. The Zibble released me. I gasped, crashing back into my body with a violent shudder. The cockpit swam back into focus. Jinseo was leaning over me, her face a mask of concern. Marcus was staring at the sonar, at the single, bright streak descending upon our position at impossible speed. "It's a lie," I choked out, my throat raw. "The whole thing. The Great Silence isn't the threat, not the immediate one." I explained it all, the words tumbling out of me in a frantic torrent, the static, the fear of the architects, the true nature of the echo. "Valerius's torpedo won't silence the echo," I finished, my voice cracking. "It will shatter the reef's containment of it. It will be like breaking a vial of plague in a crowded room. The static will be unleashed." Jinseo's eyes widened as the horrific logic clicked into place. "He thinks he's performing surgery," she whispered. "But he's about to kill the patient and release the disease." 4 minutes, Marcus said, his voice a low growl. "Even if we could convince him, we don't have time." He looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible weight. "What did that thing tell you to do?" I looked back at the prime resonator, at the silent, geometric Sibyl floating before it. My communion with it wasn't finished. I knew what it wanted. It wasn't a request. It was a choice. The only choice left. "The dissenter. The one who left the warning," I began, my own voice sounding distant. "He didn't believe in the sterile perfection of the architects. He believed that the only way to fight the static was with a harmony even more complex, more unpredictable, not by erasing the flaw, but by making the flaw the foundation of a new song." The Sibyl pulsed, a silent affirmation. The prime resonator was not just a source. It was an amplifier, a loom. We were meant to weave our own harmony, humanity's chaotic, beautiful, terrible song, directly into the core of the chorus. It was an act of supreme arrogance, an attempt to teach God a new tune. If we failed, our volatile consciousness could overload the resonator, amplifying the static's infection a millionfold and creating a cataclysm that would unravel this entire sector of the galaxy. If we succeeded, we would create a new kind of chorus, one that was not just a passive library, but an active, evolving shield, a symphony that could fight back. 3 minutes. Marcus's voice was stone. He turned to look at me, his face grim. "Can you do it?" I didn't know. The process would require a resonant to act as a conduit, to open their mind completely and channel the raw, unfiltered consciousness of our entire species into the resonator. It would be like drinking the ocean. It would likely destroy me, burn my mind out into a hollow shell, but the alternative was oblivion for everyone. "Jin," I said, my voice steady now, "I need you to bypass every safety protocol on the neural interface, link my chair directly to the Karen's emitter array, and focus it on the resonator. I have to become the broadcast." Jinseo didn't argue. Her fingers became a blur across her console, rewriting code with a desperate, focused energy. "It's a one-way trip. Aris," she said softly, not looking up from her screen. "The feedback will be—" "I know," I said. "Marcus, I need you to give me everything. All the power, all the memories, all the rage and hope you've got. The Sybil needs more than just me. It needs a signal strong enough to be heard over the static." Marcus looked from me to the resonator, then back. For a moment, I saw the ghost of his 30-year grief in his eyes. Then he nodded, a fierce, protective fire kindling in his gaze. "You got it. Kid, let's show them how loud we can sing." 2 minutes, Jinseo announced, her voice strained. "Interface is hot. I'm reading the consciousness of every crew member on the Icarus station, every ship in the fleet above. The chorus is linking you to them. They're all going to be part of the song." My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. I was no longer just a conduit. I was a vessel for the mind of my species. I closed my eyes and reached out, not to the Sybil, but to the black, silent void of the prime resonator. I opened my mind, my memories, my soul, and prepared to sing. 1 minute. Marcus barked. "Torpedo has breached the outer reef. It's coming." I took one last, shuddering breath, the hum of the chair's interface rising to a piercing whine in my ears. Outside, the torpedo screamed through the crystalline cathedrals, an instrument of humanity's fear. Inside, I began the first note of our reply, an anthem of humanity's hope, aimed at the silent, waiting heart of the world. The final minute was not a measure of time, but a compression of reality. Through the viewport, Marcus saw the resonant torpedo, a silent, descending star of death, its trajectory an unalterable line of logic aimed at the heart of their world. On her console, Jinseo watched my biometric readings flatline and then explode into a pattern of neural activity so complex it no longer resembled a human brainwave. It looked like a schematic for a galaxy. In the command chair, I felt the first connection click into place, and the world dissolved. It was not a gentle merging. It was an avalanche. I felt the crisp, analytical focus of Jinseo's mind, a beautiful, intricate lattice of code and biological formulae. Then came Marcus, not as thoughts, but as a wave of pure, unyielding emotion. 30 years of grief for my mother, a lifetime of cynicism warring with a stubborn, battered loyalty, and beneath it all, a core of defiant hope that burned like a pilot light in a storm. Then the floodgates broke, the minds of the Icarus crew, the GDC fleet, and then, impossibly, the entire planet poured into me. I was a child in Neo-Kyoto taking her first step, her wonder a perfect, crystalline note. I was a soldier dying in a forgotten border skirmish, his fear a raw, bass thrum of finality. I was 1,000 lovers sharing a first kiss, a billion parents humming a lullaby, an artist in a Martian colony staring at the red desert and feeling a pang of sublime loneliness. I was the inventor's flash of insight, the farmer's patient prayer for rain, the addict's desperate craving, the saint's quiet sacrifice. It was a cacophony, a tidal wave of every joy, sorrow, triumph, and failure our species had ever known. It was the sound of us. It was unbearable. It was glorious. The static felt it. The nascent, beautiful chaos of the human anthem was an existential threat to its creeping silence. It pushed back. The echo in my mind, once a jarring chord, became a focused, venomous counter-melody. It sought out the darkest notes in our song and amplified them. It showed me visions of our own atrocities, the mushroom clouds of the 20th century, the gene plagues of the 22nd, the casual cruelty of a child pulling the wings off an insect. It whispered in the voice of my own self-doubt, telling me I was a fraud, a pale imitation of my mother, a fool leading his friends to their death. The human symphony began to fray, the notes of hope and love drowned out by a rising shriek of despair and hatred. I was losing control. The song was turning toxic. "He's faltering," Jincio shouted, her hands flying to stabilize the energy flow. "The feedback is tearing him apart. Hold on." "Aris," Marcus roared, his voice cutting through the psychic maelstrom. He wasn't just piloting a ship anymore. He was anchoring a soul. He poured his own will into the link, not just his memories of my mother, but his raw, furious defiance. He projected his refusal to let her die for nothing, his anger at Valerius's ignorance, his simple, stubborn belief that a life without music wasn't worth living. His clear, powerful note of conviction became my tuning fork. I clung to it. I pushed back against the static, not by denying our darkness, but by accepting it as part of our song. Yes, we were cruel, but we were also capable of boundless compassion. We were fearful, but we were also brave. We were destroyers, but we were also creators. Our contradictions were not our weakness. They were our strength. The symphony stabilized, no longer just a song of hope, but a defiant anthem of existence in all its messy, flawed, and beautiful complexity. 10 seconds to impact. Jincio breathed, her face illuminated by the red glow of a dozen warning lights. I turned my full, collective consciousness toward the prime resonator. The Sibyl, the silent geometric keeper, unfolded, its black planes opening like the petals of a night-blooming flower. It was ready. I let the song go. A wave of pure, weaponized humanity surged from the cairn, a chord of 1 billion souls, and struck the black sphere of the resonator. At that exact moment, the resonant torpedo arrived. There was no explosion, no flash of light. There was only a sound. The torpedo struck the outer wall of the chamber and broadcast its single, perfect note of sterile, clinical order, the frequency of shattering. It was a note designed to find the inherent structure of the crystal and tear it apart. For a single, heart-stopping instant, 3 forces met in the heart of the chorus. There was Valerius's note of absolute order. There was the static song of entropic, cancerous noise. And there was our anthem. They did not cancel each other out. They collided. The chamber became the site of a war fought with music. The very fabric of reality seemed to groan under the strain. I screamed, not with my own voice, but with the voice of 1 billion souls pushed to their breaking point as the feedback loop threatened to annihilate me. Then, something impossible happened. Our song, the anthem of humanity, did not break. It bent. It adapted. It improvised. It wrapped itself around Valerius's rigid, killing note, absorbing its purity and stripping it of its malice. It took the chaotic, hissing energy of the static and wove it into a new, complex rhythm, turning the sound of decay into a beat of defiance. It did what our species has always done. It took the broken pieces of the world and made something new. From the prime resonator, a wave of energy erupted outward. A new song, our song, amplified a trillionfold. It met the destructive frequency of the torpedo and harmonized with it, transforming its purpose. The cracks that had begun to spiderweb across the crystalline walls of the chamber stopped. Then they began to heal, sealing themselves with veins of a new, golden light. The entire reef began to change. The pale, ethereal glow of the old chorus was consumed by a vibrant, dynamic aurora. The symphony that had been a gentle, passive library for millennia was reborn as a living, breathing will. It was no longer just a recording of the universe. It was an active participant. On the surface, Valerius and the GDC fleet watched in stunned silence. Their sensors, which had predicted the catastrophic destruction of the reef, now showed an energy reading that dwarfed a supernova. The song of the new chorus reached them, not as a sound, but as a feeling, a shared, planet-wide consciousness. In that moment, every human on Earth and in the colonies understood. They understood the threat, the sacrifice, the choice that had been made in the dark. There was no more debate, no more doubt. There was only awe. In the cockpit of the Terran, the violent surge of energy ceased. Alarms died. The roaring symphony in my head faded to a gentle, constant hum. We were floating in the heart of our creation, the chamber now a kaleidoscope of gold and violet light. "Status," Marcus croaked, his voice raw. "The torpedo is inert," Jinseo reported, her voice trembling with disbelief. "The echo, the static signature is gone. Not just gone. It's been integrated. The chorus is singing a new song. Aris. It's our song." They both turned to me. I was slumped in the chair. The neural links fused and blackened. My eyes were open, but they weren't seeing the cockpit. They were staring into the heart of the new symphony I had helped to birth. I felt the consciousness of my species, not as an overwhelming flood, but as a gentle, ambient presence. I felt the ancient, watching mind of the Sibyl. I felt the reborn chorus, a vast and powerful new ally, its song now a shield against the coming dark. I had been the conduit, the composer, but the feedback from that creation had forged a permanent bond. I was no longer just a man. A part of me was now woven into the music itself, a permanent note in the anthem of Earth. A single tear traced a path down my face. We had won. But I was not sure how much of me was left to celebrate. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the resonant, humming quiet of a newly struck bell, the sound of a world remade. In the cockpit of the Karen, now bathed in the warm, golden light of the new chorus. The air was thick with the ozone scent of a miracle. Marcus and Jinseo could only stare at me, their faces a mixture of awe and profound concern. I was still in the chair, the neural links glowing with a soft, residual energy. But I was no longer just the man who had sat down. My eyes, they would later tell me, were no longer a simple blue, but held a swirling, holographic depth, like twin nebulas. My mind, which had been a vessel for the consciousness of a species, had not fully returned to the confines of my skull. A part of it remained outside, woven into the very fabric of the symphony we had just created. I could feel the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the fusion grid in Pan America, now perfectly stable. I could feel the wonder of a child on the moon base looking up at a suddenly shimmering Earth. I could feel the slow, patient thought of the Sibyl in the chamber behind us, a silent nod of approval across an impossible distance. I was Eris Thorn, but I was also a note in a song that now filled the solar system. Aris. Jinseo's voice was a whisper, a tentative hand reaching out in the dark. I turned my head, the motion feeling slow, deliberate, as if I were moving a body I was only renting. I smiled, and I could feel the smile not just on my lips, but as a warm, rising harmony in the chorus itself. "I'm here," I said, and my voice was different. It had a new resonance, a faint harmonic undertone that seemed to vibrate in the air. All of me is here, and everywhere else, too. Marcus let out a long, shuddering breath, a sound of attention held for 30 years finally being released. He looked past me, through the viewport at the golden, singing crystal all around us. "Elara," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. She would have called this beautiful, and through the chorus, I could feel the truth of that. I could feel my mother's presence, not as a ghost, but as a memory, a foundational melody in the human anthem that I now inhabited. Her curiosity, her courage, her sacrifice, they were all there, perfectly preserved. I had not just followed her work, I had become its living conclusion. Our ascent was a journey through a world reborn. The crystalline spires no longer felt alien and menacing, but familiar, protective. They pulsed with our light, sang with our voice. As we rose, I felt a new consciousness reach out, not from the chorus, but from the surface. It was General Valerius. His mind was a rigid, disciplined structure of logic and order, but now it was shaken, humbled. The song had shown him not just the truth of the static, but the truth of his own fear. I opened a channel, not through the comms, but through the direct link of the chorus. General, I thought, the words forming not in language, but in pure intent. Stand down. The war is over. There was a long pause, a moment of profound internal conflict from the man above. Then, a feeling of surrender, not of defeat, but of awe. "I understand," he sent back, his thought pattern infused with a reverence that bordered on worship. "The world is listening." When the Karen finally broke the surface, it rose into a world holding its breath. The GDC fleet was still there, a ring of steel floating on a sapphire sea, but their weapons were cold, their posture no longer aggressive. They were an audience that had just witnessed the birth of a new god. Valerius met us on the deck of the Icarus Observatory, which had been hastily repaired. He was a man remade. The cold certainty was gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, unsettling humility. He did not salute. He simply nodded at the three of us, his gaze lingering on me. "The energy readings are impossible," he said, his voice quiet. "The song. We all heard it. We all understood." He looked out at the horizon. "For my entire life, I have trained to fight monsters. I never considered that the best weapon might be a symphony. He was the first, but he would not be the last." Humanity's relationship with the universe had been fundamentally and irrevocably altered. The months that followed were a blur of creation, a global renaissance orchestrated by the new music of the spheres. We called it the Age of the Anthem. The chorus was no longer a passive library to be studied, but an active partner, a dynamic extension of our collective will. With its guidance, we stabilized the Earth's climate, developed FTL travel based not on brute force but on harmonic space-time folding, and created art that could genuinely heal psychological trauma. Jinseo became a pioneer in bioharmony, learning to use resonant frequencies to guide cellular regeneration, effectively ending disease. Marcus, finding a peace he never thought possible, dedicated his life to training a new generation of pilots, teaching them to navigate not just the sea, but the currents of the chorus. And I became its keeper. I could no longer live a normal life. I was too connected, too vast. My body remained a physical anchor, but my consciousness was intertwined with the chorus. I resided in the Icarus Observatory, in the same chair my mother had used. But my view was no longer limited to the deep. I was the guardian of the anthem, the sentinel watching for any returning dissonance. I could feel the subtle shift in the solar winds, the birth of a new star 1,000 light years away, the quiet, dreaming thoughts of my entire species. It was a profound and beautiful burden. I walked in a garden of 1 billion souls, tending to the song that was our collective existence. One evening, years after our descent, I sat with Marcus and Jinsiu on the observatory deck, watching the sun set over a world that was finally, truly at peace. The sky was not just a sky, it was a canvas of light and color that I could feel as a gentle, contented harmony. "Do you ever miss it?" Marcus asked, his voice soft, a question he had never dared to ask before. Just being a person, just Aris. I considered it, feeling the truth of the question resonate within me. I felt the memory of my own singular, isolated consciousness, the sharp edges of individual ego, the simple pleasure of an unshared thought. I could still access those memories, but they felt like looking at a photograph of a stranger. Sometimes, I admitted, my voice a quiet harmony with the waves. But what I have now, it's not a loss, it's an expansion. I am more myself than I have ever been, because I am also more a part of everyone else. As we sat in comfortable silence, I felt a new note enter the symphony, from a place far beyond our galaxy. It was a query, a single, impossibly ancient chord of pure, analytical curiosity. It was not a threat. It was a question. The architects had heard us. They had heard our flawed, chaotic, beautiful, improvised song echo across the cosmos. They had heard us take their perfect instrument and teach it to sing with a soul. They did not send ships. They did not send a warning. They simply listened. Their entire philosophy of sterile harmony challenged by the vibrant, living proof of our anthem. They were the gardeners of existence, and a single, wild, impossible flower had just bloomed in their pristine garden. The song they heard was a declaration. It said that life was not a flaw to be corrected. It said that chaos could be beautiful, that pain could be the root of compassion, and that the most perfect harmony is the one that has room for every voice. The universe had been singing a song of cold, mathematical perfection. Now, it was learning the sound of hope, and we, the flawed and noisy inhabitants of a small blue world, were teaching it the words